Michael Magid, live from Hollywood, California, with me. You know him as the czar of the virtual background, the one and only Pro GK Academy, Omar Zini. The reason I went with you, Omar, first is because the next two people that we've got right here both have women's national team goalkeeping experience. Both have gold medals, I believe, for the Olympics too, as well. The one and only Angel City co-owner, Saskia Weber, UCLA goalkeeper coach, 99 World Cup winner. And then this is an absolute treat for me because this showcases not only how long I've been doing a bad job in the game, but how many people I've been coming in contact with my entire career who've done so many amazing things. The one and only Houston Dynamo goalkeeper coach, Paul Rogers. Paul, honestly, this is an honor, man. Thanks so much for taking the time. And by the way, thank you for letting me know to not be scared of you anymore. After 20 years, it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on, and there's definitely no reason to be scared. I don't know where that all came from.
What are you scared about?
Exactly.
Well, Paul's an imposing figure, and
this is why you played in. I can't even start. There's no fear.
No, trust me. And if you watch Paul's videos, he talks about this, right? And that's the reason why I didn't get to a certain level.
No fear in goalkeeping.
I will say this, okay? The number one thing that happened with me with Paul back in the day is I was the first real legit goalkeeper camp I'd ever coached at. And let's just say my striking was not up to par. And I remember Paul walking by. At the time, I didn't know his dry sense of humor. And some of my shots weren't doing that great. And Paul walks by and he goes like, if you can't strike a ball, you're not going to make a very good goalkeeper coach, are you? And then he just kept walking. And the next thing I know, I was like Omar Zini. I was at home. I was working on my right foot, my left foot. I'm like, I can't strike a ball if Paul Rogers says so. So
hey, I will tell you something, Mike. I've never been a better striker of the ball since I became a goalkeeper coach. It's amazing. I'm so much better than I was when I was a player.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Well,
yeah, no, seriously. I mean, I've become it's like a striker's course for me. I go out there and it's just, I forget who it was, Mike. I think one of our guests was just like, yeah, as a coach, you most likely need to have the final shot because you know what you're trying to get at with the movements and all that stuff. So I've definitely taken that to heart, and my quads, my hamstrings, my everything has been sore. But I definitely have improved my left foot. It's not just a score anymore. I can actually slot it, put it where I want to do it. So it's good.
Well, yes. Well, speaking of that, our guest today has an absolute bullet for a shot. I mean, the guy literally, I think he took a shot on me, and because we had to do demos at camp, and I remember I was like, oh, that's what a pro strikes a ball like? Ooh, okay. Yeah, maybe this won't happen. Paul, for some of the people out there who might not be kind of familiar with your journey and everything like that, why don't you tell them a little bit kind of about your role at the Houston Dynamo, your time with the national team, and about performance goalkeeping?
Yeah, obviously I've been with the Dynamo now. I think I'm going into my 6th season. 2015, I left the national team actually just before the 2015 World Cup in Canada. Came to the Dynamo, basically been here since then. Head up the goalkeeping here, oversee the first team, RGV, which is the USL affiliate, and the academy. Obviously, I've got some great goalkeeping coaches here with me. Obviously, Jason Grubb down in the academy and Ryan Coulter down at RGV, 2 great coaches. We've got Brenton Saylor, who's obviously been on the show with you guys as well, working with the NWSL team with a dash. So between the 4 of us, it's a pretty good group to have going. And then obviously work with the first team on a day-to-day basis. Before that, as you said, I was with the women's national team with the US for 6 years, from 2009. I was with them. What World Cup? Germany World Cup. Yeah, Germany World Cup 2011, lost in the final on penalties. And then the 12 Olympics in London, which obviously we won. And before that, Canada in Beijing, which we lost to the US in the quarters in extra time. Devastating.
That was that game, to all my Canadian friends out there, that was a great game to watch, period. And that was, I'm never going to say I wasn't rooting for Canada, but it was rough. It was rough.
It was rough from a goalkeeping standpoint because obviously Erin McLeod did her ACL in that game, and Erin had been fantastic. Obviously KK came in and had been fantastic, obviously for Canada as well. So I had 2 quality goalkeepers with a squad, and obviously ended up losing the game in extra time. But I think one of my first games for the US might have been against Canada. It was a bit weird.
Yeah, I always tease them about that. So it's okay.
Yeah, it's funny. You guys have oh no, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where I was before that. College, Florida State was where I was before that, before Canada, with Mark Krikorian. So yeah, I've been around the block a little bit.
I mean, your guys' resumes, both of you guys, Saskia and Paul. I mean, your guys' resumes, like Omar's like, I have an Instagram channel. It's pretty popular. And I'm like, I've done comedy before. No, but you know, the amazing thing is that in regards to the Canada to the United States thing, I mean, you arguably got to work with two of the deepest goalkeeper pools in the world back to back. I mean, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I think everywhere I've been lucky. I've had good goalkeepers. You know, people will say, "Oh, you're this coach or that coach." I mean, you're only as good as your players. And I've been very lucky everywhere I've been, even in the college game. Even go back to when I first started coaching back in England. I've had good goalkeepers. If you have good goalkeepers, it makes things a lot easier. And I don't just mean good quality on the pitch, but goalkeepers that want to be better. And that's the key part. All the way through the pools, both in Canada and obviously with the US. They've always wanted to be better, in the same here at the Dynamo. You know, even obviously Big Joe Willis, who moved on to Nashville, has just had a great season in the MLS with all the clean sheets he's had. Obviously, they lost last night, but I mean, what a season he's had. So you turn around and say they're great. You know, they're all great goalkeepers. So yeah, I mean, you can't argue when you've got people that want to play the position and want to do well at it.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of the position, now let's kind of move into this topic right now. But basically, today's topic, guys, is going to be kind of organic starting positions. And there's been a big debate kind of in the goalkeeping world. And Paul, we were talking about it a little bit earlier in regards to a lot of people out there feel that, you know, the game has to be the realism. And, you know, you were talking a little bit off the air about how yes and no. But maybe for some of the parents out there and younger coaches that might not know what we mean by an organic starting position versus kind of like a static starting position, kind of what do we mean by that?
Yeah, and I'll probably go off topic here a little bit, but as I was saying there, I didn't know that was off air. I wasted all my best coaching moments there. I should have recorded that. But yeah, I mean, and listen, I want to make a statement before we get going. I do both. So it's not like I'm going to sit here and preach and say, oh, I do all this like new age training where we're always starting in this position or that position. There's reasons, hopefully there's reasons to the madness for what everyone does. But you've got what I would call your atypical goalkeeping coaching, where you're starting in a position which might not even be in a goal. You know, you've got goalkeeping coaches that don't use goals at all in training, that do stuff to the side. And then you've got, you know, sessions, exercises where you'll start maybe in the near post area. Then you've got exercises that you'll start top of the 18 on the penalty spot, 5 yards outside the box. And a lot of that depends on, one, how your team session is, and are you doing just goalkeeping sessions versus are you doing goalkeeping sessions that's within a team session? Yeah. Because I'm sure if you're doing just goalkeeping sessions, like a camp, for example, or a clinic, then you don't have field players. It's very different to obviously my job, where I might have the goalkeepers for whatever it may be that day, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then I'm going into the team session. And truthfully, a lot of when you talk about true starting position of the game, will actually be the first thing they go into with the team. But I class that as my exercise. I'll give you an example, like a 3v2 exercise. So let's say, for instance, we do 3v2, attackers 3v2. Ball starts with a goalkeeper. This is something Tab likes to do. So ball starts with a goalkeeper. He plays out a diagonal or a straight ball to one of the three attackers. So normal starting position, they're starting in a goal kick, spraying the ball out to a position they would be playing it. Defenders start, say, top of the 18 or around that area where they would be. Now that's a real position. They would be taking the goal kick. So they're starting at the 6-yard line. Now, as soon as they play it, now their starting position obviously has to change and change at the right tempo. I'm not doing that in my session, so to speak, but I class that as my session because I'm stood there with them. And if they take the goal kick and stand there, well, now I'm coaching. You know, why aren't you following up? Why aren't you keeping the space and the distance connected to the two defenders? And then you can start talking about communication, et cetera, et cetera. Then you've got when you talk about exercise, if you want to talk about just the goalkeeping environment, you might do I don't know, a through ball exercise where you do start the goalkeepers. Yeah, we do one fairly often. 4 markers, they're probably anywhere between 12 and 16 yards out, just saying an arc around the inside of the box. They start on one of those markers, visual verbal cue, they start moving backwards, and then you're live. So instead of them moving down the line, coming towards the ball, they're now moving backwards. Now you've got decisions to make, because obviously the space is behind you that you've got to protect. But depending on what their next action is, you might be coming forward or continuing backwards. Now, am I going to do that with a young goalkeeper? Yeah, we have done it with younger goal. When I say young, I'm talking 10-year-old. Yes, but you're going to do it slightly different. You might script it a bit that, yes, you've got to get back because you've got to teach them to protect the space behind. Then when you get that down, how far back do they go? Because let me tell you, a 10-year-old's going to go to the goal line or in the goal. Then when you've got them back where you need them to go, then maybe you start talking about, okay, but if the ball's only, touched off the foot 5-6 yards, now you've got to come back forward, etc. But it doesn't mean that every exercise that we do, we're starting in these advanced positions. I told you I was just doing a session for Tasco down here, and going through the video, the first exercise is us coming over hurdles and taking a low ball. Well, that's us coming from 2 yards off the line and finishing 4 yards off the line.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's as basic as it comes.
It's funny that you brought that up, Paul, in regards to your job isn't over, because Saskia, that's one thing obviously at the collegiate level with yourself, and Omar, I know you coach at the collegiate level as well too, but you're not coaching at UCLA, so we're going to use UCLA as the example as the higher level program right now. Don't worry, I know you guys were in the national championship game for D2, okay, so I'm not going to slight you right there. But it is true. Thank you, Paul, for bringing up the fact that your session is not over when you send the goalkeepers over with the team.
Absolutely not.
That part of your session still. And Saskia, I know you've been really huge with that at UCLA with that.
Absolutely not. It's 100% part of the session. And like Paul said, you're with them. You're standing with them. You're there. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? What's your decision making here? Because you've set them up to go into the session with the team. It's not okay. No, you're still coaching. You're still understanding why each individual goalkeeper makes the decisions that they make, and have the discussion. It's not on the head coach's hands at that point.
Yeah. I see Omar.
I told you, and Omar made fun of me. I'm behind them in the goal. And you're like, oh God. I'm like, but I am. A lot of times I'm in the goal with them, behind them, like in the net, because I want to see their angles. I want to see their positioning. And any goalkeeper coach that just walks over to the side, I don't agree with that. You have to see the how your goalkeepers are positioning themselves, if they're making the right choices, because training as a goalkeeper doesn't necessarily transition into gameplay. And there is a disconnect with some goalkeepers there, and you have to figure it out.
Yeah. Omar, I see you taking a lot of notes right there. Right now, anytime you have Paul on, you want to be taking notes. But one thing I actually do want to ask you, kind of, Omar, because you did have Paul on one of your IGs back in the summertime and everything like that. And one thing that's difficult for you as a private trainer is, like Paul was talking about earlier, it's okay, well, how do I replicate these starting positions when it's just me and them in isolation, and what are some of the things you took from that?
No, I think, even kind of going back, I posted something on my YouTube channel a few days ago with this conversation, actually, Mike, about, Paul talked about starting positions and how not all the time, but sometimes you'll start from the middle of the goal, but more often than not, it's the 18 back, not to the goal line forward. Most likely we're moving back towards our line. We're in transition moments where we have to find our, one, spatial awareness, dimensions of the goal, and then from there, communication. So you have so many different factors and variables. So understanding that and taking kind of that information, the last few sessions that I've run, I've tried a lot more to, okay, you know what, this is what I want to do for my drill, but okay, where is this coming from the game? Okay, what's the 3 or 4 moments, as Phil Wadden told me once, what are the 3 or 4 moments happening prior to that actually, ball getting played over the top? Okay, maybe the goalkeeper starts 18 yards and then back. So I started doing that a lot more, and I think the goalkeepers have gotten more out of it. But one of the notes that I have here is for the younger goalkeepers that I've trained, a lot of times I'm, creating the setup and then I'm verbalizing what I want to have them get out of it. But a lot of the times I've noticed a lot of kids take what you hear, they run the drill, and then their parents tell me, hey, we worked on this during the session, but they didn't know what they were doing in a game. And that's one thing I'll ask everybody on the panel is just, I feel like there's a lot of times where I think me as a young coach, I overcoach too much and I try to explain it too much as a private trainer because I see them once every other week. So I'm trying to really give them all the information they need, but they're not able to problem solve when I'm not there. So it's been difficult. So I'm trying to work through that where it's like, maybe instead of me telling you where this play is happening in a game, why don't you say, hey, what does the setup look like to you? And tell me what you think we're working on. If I have you starting here and the ball's coming from the right side, what do you think we're working on? And I feel like that's something that, from my notes that I have here, I just kind of understand. It's like fluctuating between giving them the game plan and then having them verbalize to you what they think the game plan is based on what they're seeing.
No, that's what I meant by a disconnect. Like,
Yeah.
you can do it in training, but is it connecting? Are they transitioning into play with full team, into 11v11? Is what you're teaching, when we do that repetitive, they get it, but is it actually translating? Like, are they getting it? Are they making that? Because you might only have to make that decision once in a game that we just went over and what is it working? Are you seeing it? And that's the most important part.
I want to ask Paul right now, because of the fact is that you do both sides. You've got obviously performance goalkeeping where you've got individual sessions as well too, and group sessions outside of a club environment, and then you also do have the club environment too. How do you, in those individual sessions, how do you, like Omar was talking about, make sure there's not that disconnect and make sure that everything you're doing there is translating to the game for them?
Yeah, well, you've got a different level of goalkeepers as well. I mean, that's the other part. You can't walk before you can run. So you're still talking about the first action. So if you talk about there, what Omar's saying, let's say you're talking about moving back. Well, your first action is still once you're in that position. So if they were never high, just say they never went high, just say they stuck themselves at 6 yards. Okay, so what would the action be at 6 yards, right? Then you've got to explain the next action. So if you were at 8 yards, what would the action be? And you've still got to talk through what that action is. Otherwise, if you're just working on the positioning the whole time, you're never actually working on the action. And the action typically is what's going to happen. Now, eventually you want to get to the positioning and the action. But what's our job to start with is keeping the ball at the back of the net. So sometimes we're going to do that the wrong way, but we've still got to know what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I would say is the difference for me from what we do at Performance Goal, what we're doing like on our Friday night sessions versus obviously what we're doing first team. The other part of it is you're breaking it down maybe away from the goal, the technical aspect, and then we do a lot of walkthrough stuff and explain it. You were talking about what's actually happening and ask them what's happening here. Use a pullback because it's always the best or the easiest way to do it, a pullback scenario. How many times when you do a pullback and you watch goalkeeping coaches do it, and I've done it as well, do you move from just say a yard inside the post to the post as the person's about to do the pullback? But you wouldn't move from there because you shouldn't be there to start with. Where you should be is at about 4 or 5 yards, probably a little bit outside the post because the ball's come down the channel. And now you've got to make the decision, is the player going to penetrate towards you? And then maybe you're going to have to confront them, maybe you're not, etc. So for me, you've still got to do the action first. So I'd still put them on the post to start with, have no movement. Okay, here's the action. Now put the movement in there and explain to them, so why are we asking you to do this movement? And see what they say. And some of them are just going to look at you like you got 7 heads, but you've only got to get it through to 1. And then eventually you get it through to 2. And then eventually you get it through to 3. But that could take a year. You're talking about a 10 to 14-year-old. I mean, I'm not being funny. We got academy kids that they're not grasping it. And they're 15, 16. They're getting trained 5 times a week. And they're still not always grasping it. And a pullback is always the easiest because there's so many movements within it. Because then you've got the action of the ball being pulled back across you and the decisions you have to make then of how do you deal with that? Because that's one where, in the modern game, I hate using the word modern game. Don't use it. In the game, how many now just want to go to this blocking shape when the ball's actually there to be won?
Yeah. Right.
And especially, depending on the type of goalkeeper you've got, typically I've got 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" goalkeepers. You've only got to attack it with your hands and you're already 7.5 foot. Yeah, we've got into this.
Saskia's smiling because that's how she thinks. See, now I see where there was a little bit of a crossover in regards to the point of view from those old school days. Saskia, that's something that I know you've tried to stress with a lot of goalkeepers, and I know that's been, I don't want to say it's a struggle, but it's understanding the time and place from based on your position, based on what action you should go, whether you should go hands first, whether you should make yourself big and go into a block, etc.
Right, because you know how I feel. Kids are so literal. Like, it's like, oh, we're gonna train the K save. Like, and now you're 10 yards away from somebody doing a K save, which doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to, as a goalkeeper coach, train the situation, because there's so many different decisions for different situations. Like, take Schmeichel today. Do I think he should have done tried to do a K save on that save against Fulham? Absolutely not. He was too far away from him. He slotted into the side netting. Like, with his size and his ability, I think he should have had his weight forward and try to make a regular save. He was like 7 yards away, but he came rushing out. He tried to do kick his leg out and stuff like that. Look, love Schmeichel, it's fine, but that's indicative of the fact, you have to make different decisions in different situations, and you have to give those kids that knowledge in their toolbox. This isn't this is all I know and this is what I'm gonna do. Yeah, no. And sometimes it works and most of the times it doesn't. No, you have to make a decision as you're coming out, as you're dealing with the situation, moving side to side, crossing over your box. What's the situation that I'm dealing with at this moment? Yeah. What does it call for?
By the way, Omar, I think you love it. Go ahead, Omar.
No, I kind of want to go back to the point about the crossing. And just kind of,
Michael, I was like,
no, I could talk about that forever. But no, I think what Paul was saying is that, very rarely you're going to start right near the near post and then move towards the near post. And then from there you get the cutback. So I had a drill probably last week, and where you get a pass back on the other side of the goal, you swing it all the way across, and that person can drive at you. And if they drive at you and they shoot, it's done. Or they can lay it off for me, who's going to be, serving the ball. And I had, certain kids who were watching the kids prior to them. Every time I touched the ball towards the goal, they would step towards the near post. And okay, good. I'm coming towards the 18-yard box, which is good. Probably the likelihood of me lifting the ball over your head from probably 8-9 yards towards the touchline is going to be very, very minimal. You're probably going to do a good job of cutting that off. So then I said, okay, let me test something out. The next rep, I took a touch outside, further away from goal, and those same kids still kept coming towards the near post. So I stopped the drill. I said, why from the visual cue are you stepping towards the near post if I'm taking the touch further away from goal? With the likelihood now is that I can serve it over your head. And one kid told me, oh, you know what, I saw Paul do it the last rep, and I thought maybe that's what I was supposed to do. And I said, okay. Then I had someone else, the young goalkeeper, and I said, why were you doing it? And he said, well, I've had situations where I feel like my athleticism, because I can jump higher, I can actually work backwards towards the goal and still get those balls that are going to go over my head. So that's why I actually kept stepping to the near post. So you get those kids, some kids, they see somebody else do it and they decide to do it themselves. And other kids actually have a reason of why they're choosing to go deploy that technique. So again, it's just you get different groups of people, not even within the same group sometimes. And it's good to feel to have those groups where you have some kids who know what they're doing, so they can kind of verbalize and explain to the other kids. But at the same time too, it's what Tim Dittmer one time told me. He said, instead of having one coach and 5 goalkeepers in a group of 6, why don't you have 5 goalkeepers, 5 goalkeeper coaches and 1 goalkeeper working? So I think that's super important as well when you work on starting positions and stuff like that, is give the goalkeepers you're working with, I think at a younger age as well, opportunities to vocalize what they see and what they're learning, and they could surprise you every once in a while.
I love what you were just saying right there. And Paul, is that something that you're kind of big on as well too, is kind of because again, we're talking about creating autonomous goalkeepers, is that making sure that the goalkeepers in the session as well are helping in the coaching process as well too.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's coaching or just what they see. I mean, it's, I've always used the analogy of, funny enough, working with a national team and having a conversation with Shannon Box, right? And I'm having a conversation with her. I've never played in the middle of midfield. So why am I sitting telling her what to do? Why wouldn't I be asking her what she sees and then offer some solutions that I see? And then she can pick the one that she thinks works, or she might turn around and go, no, I'm going to still do it my way because I think that's the best way. It's no different to your goalkeeping. They're the ones that are in there It's the same as when you do analysis, when you're doing your video. You can pause it, and a photo is a scary thing. Look at VAR right now. It's a scary thing because it's not video, it's a photo. So if I pause the video at the very right time and the foot's out the ground and they not got it in time, okay, that's a photo. They might have been moving at however many meters a second. How are they going to get their foot in the ground? And then I'm going to say their technique's wrong? I mean, that's impossible. So you've got to get their feedback, one on what they see, two on what they feel, and then maybe some other stuff they've been told along the way. This year with the three keepers I've had here, the most of the time, obviously Marco Maric is, had a different upbringing. Obviously Cody's had a different upbringing, and then we've got Michael, who's really had me. So you've got three different views plus mine. At the end of it, we've got to come to an agreement on what we think's best. And luckily they trust in what I say, and we film a lot of the training sessions to go through. But there's often times I'll come back and I go, you know what, lads, I said this. I've gone back and watched the video. Scratch it. We need to look at it this way, because maybe something I thought, I use foot out of the ground because it's just a black and white one. I was saying your foot was out of the ground there, your balance wasn't right, when actually there's no way you could have got your foot back in the ground because you were still moving for whatever reason. So you have to listen to what they've got to say. Don't mean they're right either. I mean, at the end of it, they're football players, but if you're all trying to get to the same common goal, you'll find the common area.
Yeah.
And Mike, sorry to finish. Can I just add one more point to that? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think most of us have used, video footage. I have an iPad out there and I show in private sessions, but in group sessions, I'll show them.
I don't think you use any video footage whatsoever, Omar. I've never seen a session of yours on video.
No, but to Paul's point, I feel like, again, as a young coach coming in, trying to prove to the older kids or professional players that I do train in the off season, it's like, you can prove whatever you want slowing down footage. You can always prove. You want to say, yeah, your foot didn't get into the ground, and you can just kind of prove whatever you want. So I think for any coaches like that, the grain of salt, but context is super, super important when you watch footage, especially on the pros. And I've learned that myself, where I've criticized the hair, criticized somebody, and then somebody will DM me and be like, hey, it's easier for you to say, but can you consider this as well? And then they tell me to consider something new. I go, oh my God, you're right. They're playing against the best players who, Messi can easily chip them, slot them, put it between their legs. So now they're having to focus on three different variables within that save. So yeah, the last thing they're probably worried about is getting their foot into the ground and then sweeping their foot. You know what I mean? So it's super important to take videos with a grain of salt, but more so the play and the seconds prior to the final action. I think that's kind of the topic that we're trying to work on today. Is the final action is important, but what are the movements and the little things, whether it's communication. I have a taller goalkeeper that I'm working with right now. He doesn't know how to keep his hips low. He runs across the goal super upright, and as the shot comes, he drops his hips, and then by that point, his legs are rooted into the ground. So it's just like looking at those few seconds prior, and then kind of chopping it up for them to understand. Okay, it's not just the final action that we're worried about. We're talking about the movement prior, and how can we really maximize that and optimize that to make yourself put yourself in the best position to make those saves.
Omar, I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to bring that up with the Saskia right now, obviously, is that, one of the big things that we've always talked about is attributes, right? The attributes and the profile of the goalkeeper. And one of the things that you've seen in the past is where a lot of goalkeepers trying to mimic another goalkeeper on the squad, and trying to do things the way they do things when they have a completely different profile. So their starting position needs to be different there, but they'll be like, oh yeah, but a coach told me you're always supposed to be here. Always. I hate that always word. I hate that always word. And I don't know about you, Saskia.
Yeah. I mean, you know how I feel about that. You have to take each goalkeeper individually. E is 5'5". Kelly's 6 feet tall. Starting positions are going to be different. The way you handle things are going to be different. Your strengths and weaknesses. And so it's not just cookie cutter. It's not just, here, everybody do my drill. This is how you're supposed to be. This is your positioning. This is where it's supposed to be. And, you're supposed to be this far off the near post in this situation, or you're supposed to be here on a cross. And so it doesn't work that way. Every single goalkeeper is different. Their size, their strengths, their weaknesses, and stuff like that. And if you can't handle 4 keepers and training them to their specifics, find another job. So, I mean, you have to break it down. you know, to maximize their talent, to maximize their athleticism and everything. They're individuals. You don't have, you know, we're not talking about systems. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about 30 players, we're talking about 4, maybe, you know, and figure out their strengths and weaknesses and work on their weaknesses. But it's not, you can't go into something saying, this is how it is. This is the angle. This is where you're supposed to be. It's a gray area. Some people handle it differently. Some people can cover the near post from further tucked in. Some people have to be closer to near post. Some people, you know, and you got to be able to identify that as a coach and work on that.
And
That's
Saskia,
something. Go ahead, Omar.
No, I kind of want to add to what you just said. I trained this kid last summer. He was on the Real Salt Lake Academy. So I'm like, okay, you know, he's going to be very, very good. And throughout the session, I started noticing that he would cheat extremely to his far post.
Right.
And I would say, why are you moving so far to your far post? He's like, well, my coach always tells me, and I keep getting beat on my far post, so I'm just going to leave the near post open because I'm much better coming towards the goal than going away from it. And I said, well, that's super interesting. You're also like 6'5", so like I feel like if you kind of maybe, you know, worked on, you know, foot saves or worked on certain movements where you can put yourself in a better position from the angle to utilize your size, that'd be better. It's like, well, I think I'm just going to probably like just stay more to the far post. I feel more comfortable going to the near post. And I was like, okay, like in my head, I'm just like, okay, if whatever you feel comfortable with to conceptualize the best save possible, go for it. But in my opinion, again, everybody has their way of doing things. And as coaches, that's something that I've kind of want to throw again to the panel. Mike, I know we're going off topic here, but I have a young kid that I've been working with. She's really, really good. And the technical side of things is not there yet. But as a goalkeeper and just stepping into goal and making saves, unbelievable. But I'm like, do I take a step back and push her to reality of like, look, the way you're making saves is great. But in 2 or 3 years, when you're going up against people who not only can make saves, but are doing it the right way, or not the right way, but like, you know, the way that I guess visually it looks more appetizing as a goalkeeper coach, you'd be like, okay, this person was trained right. You know what I mean? I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, is she having to make those saves because of positioning? Like, you have to back it up. Like, why, you know, are you a shot stopper because your positioning's off or because of this? Not that your position, not that I'm the guru on positioning, but let's figure that out. Like, why do you have to make all these saves? Like, we all know that we don't, you know, if we do things properly in a context, then we don't have to, like, you know, end up, you know, in rehab the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, and my point being, and you know, I have certain people that I feel have been taught, and I've seen it at the highest level, watching your post. Like, and it's obvious to me that whoever, like, from their education is just like, that's the most important thing. Your near post, don't get near post. Well, at the certain level that they're at, they're leaving their far post incredibly open. And at that level, at a world level, they're getting tucked in all the time far post. Because why? Yeah. The forwards that they're coming up against can do it. So do we fix their positioning and say, you can't save a ball that's a yard away from you going to the near post. So you're hugging your near post and leaving that much open at your far post because you think that the talent against you can't score there. Well, guess what? They can. Here's a reality check. So now we have to fix your positioning and make you better at your near post, make you quicker so that you aren't giving up your far post. And that's another level of coaching. I'm sorry. It's not just, hey, kids, watch your near post.
You know, what's funny right there is, like, by the way, the SOS with the trash can trucks going
by.
That? Yeah, I thought they were just like, they're like really emphasizing what you were trying to say. They're like, hey, everyone needs to hear this part of the podcast.
But
I want to ask Paul this though, Omar, if you don't mind. I'm going to interrupt you for a second because, you know, how often do we have Paul on? Is that one of the big things for me as I've gotten older as a goalkeeper coach is I've found cones have become the bane of my existence for the longest time, because kids get so, like Saskia, you talk about how literal kids get. Here's where we start. Cool, because this cone's right here. There are no cones on the field. The movement of the ball determines your starting position and how you move throughout your area, right, Paul? So how do we get kids to stop looking for cones and stop looking how to move in patterns and more start recognizing the movement of the ball?
Just tell them to look at the ball. I mean, it's in everything. It's not that doesn't change. I mean, you can go all the way and look at any pro session around the world, kids sessions, all the same. You're always going to get them glancing down, but telling them to have their eye on the ball wherever the ball's coming from and to the whole time is key. And obviously doing exercises without them. For me, I'm a big proponent of equipment, but I'm also a proponent of not having equipment. You've got to be able to do both. A lot of the stuff we do in the goal, when I say in the goal, I mean in the goal, in the 6, in the 18, there'll be a start point, which will be a flat marker, but it won't necessarily be a slew of cones. A lot of that stuff will be done, it's still in a goal and still has a 6-yard box, but it won't typically be in the 18-yard box just because of how our fields are. By the way, I'm a big proponent of always having a 6-yard box, always.
No, I 100% agree. I was going to say that. The best thing a goalkeeper can do is have a lined box, period. Yeah. Because you're learning your angles and everything on your peripheral, and knowing where your posts are, knowing where the 6 box is, knowing where the corners of that are, knowing where the corners of the 18, knowing where the 12 marker is, like everything like that. That is so important for goalkeeper training, and it irritates me when people are like, oh, just, go over there, train your keepers. And then coming back in club and stuff, and they're like, why don't they understand where they are? Maybe because we never train in the box, and maybe because the kids don't see the lines for their peripheral, understand that. It's so important. It's so important. And I agree with you 100%, Paul. Like at least a 6-yard box.
But I will say, go ahead.
Well,
go
yeah,
ahead,
for me at the club, the problem is the space, as crazy as it sounds, at a professional football club. We actually only have one first team pitch. So what we've done is lined on the outside of it to maintain 6s everywhere. But how you cannot have a goalkeeping area in this day and age is beyond me.
And you know what I asked our club before, I'm not with them anymore. I said, can we just, that space over there, can you just make me a 6-yard box? Can you just make me like a little 6-yard box so I can put a goal there so I can train the keepers? And
you gotta buy spray paint.
I know. I was like, that's what I was about to do. It was asking for I don't know, the second coming. I have no idea. It didn't happen. And I was just like, yeah, at least you have 6-yard boxes.
I will say, I am going to say this right now for any of the younger goalkeeper coaches out there who are listening to this. It goes both ways. It goes both ways. You can't expect or assume that a club is going to provide you the right dimensions. You've got to ask for that. And the thing is, if you keep training your goalkeepers in isolation in areas that are unrealistic to the game and never give them the proper dimensions, and then they go into games and they don't understand how to move and they don't understand their positioning, that's on you too. Paul, I don't know how you feel about that, but that was my Paul Rogers type moment where I was trying to be very adamant about something and disciplined.
Yeah, you have to stand up for what you believe in. It doesn't, it's the same as coaches you want or players you want. It's, at the end of it, you're a professional coach. It's your livelihood, so you need certain things. It's like having, even as a youth coach, if say a college coach, I remember my first college job. I'm like, hang on, we're not using the same balls we use in a game. Yet you want to do distribution. Well, I need the same ball. You don't have a different ball. I want the exact same ball that we're playing with game in, game out. And if we change ball, I want to change ball in training. They're the little things that are important, because the flight of the ball changes how you strike. You're using a Nike ball versus an Adidas ball. They're 2 different balls. You throw into the mix I don't know what you use in college now. I've seen Wilson, which is dangerous, but you start throwing in balls that are like that. It's different. When you're striking or taking a ball or whatever. So all those things you've got to fight for. And, it's typical even in the pro game, goalkeeping is an afterthought until it's a problem and you're conceding goals.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Look, 100%.
Well, look at Liverpool. Liverpool is the best example, right? Liverpool is the best example. Klopp comes in. We need a goal, after the Champions League stuff or whatever, which is, it's harsh I'm going to blame it on one player, but we need a world-class goalkeeper if we want to compete. And they went and got Alisson, and voila.
Yeah.
You're competing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Omar. What were you about to say?
No. I think I know since we have Paul on, I've had these questions in the last few sessions of training young kids who are extremely, extremely good. Not to my doing. They're just really, really good goalkeepers, and they have a very natural feel for the game. And I've just kind of felt, certain things that I want to not isolate, but like, they're making a save at the angle and they're, it's like a smother save, an easy scoop, but they feel comfortable killing it. Or on 1v1s, instead of coming out and staying big, they come out and jump at the ball, but they're effective at it because they see the visual cues and the triggers. So I'm kind of caught now as a coach where I have my question here. Said if a young goalkeeper has a natural feel for the game, and then coaching optimal technique into them is they're showing some discouragement, what's the best way to go about that? Because I don't know if I'm supposed to just let them be them, because that's naturally they're so gifted and they read the game so well and they make saves that nobody else can save. So like, I know Paul, you and I think Jack Stern mentioned to me, and even Tim Dittmer, of like, you're looking for that special quality at a young age. The technical stuff, everything will come, but the special attribute, can they make that big save that a team needs throughout the game to, secure 3 points? So for me as a young coach, do I just allow them to be themselves and then coach around that? Or do I kind of foreshadow certain things that could potentially become issues if I don't coach it now?
So if you coached Peter Schmeichel, what would you have done with him?
I mean, I have to see him on a day-to-day basis, but I would probably be like, look, you're huge, you're a big dude, just use your body, go for it.
Because I mean, technique was different, right?
Oh, very different.
If you compare like him to a Van der Sar, I mean, you're talking two ends of the spectrum, right? Yeah. So that's the benefit. Obviously, if one of your kids is Peter Schmeichel, by all means, give me a phone call after this. But that's the question: is how effective are they? Doesn't mean you can't. I don't want to say change it, but can you work with it? Right? There's certain things can you work with. Now, if they're catching, with one hand on the side of their head, the ball, I mean, obviously, then that's probably not going to work long term. But if they're doing certain things where you're like, okay, you're getting away with it now and it's effective now. But as the pace of the game gets quicker or the physicality of the players gets better, is that going to affect it? And as a coach, you've got to make that decision, right? Is that going to change as the game changes, for whatever part of the game changes for those kids?
Yeah, and I think
then you'd look at it. No, but then you'd look at it and say, okay, can I start introducing another option for them? And instead of forcing it down their throat, be like, look, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried this? I give you an example. The boy Marco, who we had in, one thing I noticed early when I was looking at him, he just dealt with balls by his feet very strangely. I felt like it was just weird. I can't tell you why, but I wasn't totally happy with how they stuck. I felt it was more luck than quality. And when I met him in person, there was a lot of quality there. It wasn't as bad as maybe I thought. But then when you work on it, you realize, well, probably he's not done as much as what we do. And now I look at it after one season and his handling around his feet is exceptional. And you're like, well, there was no big deal. It was just a case of putting it in there. And I didn't go and say, you've got to change this. I mean, I felt he picked the ball up very tight to his feet. I felt he could have got his hands down there earlier. His eyes could have been better on the ball, blah, 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 blah. But when I look at it now, it wasn't a case of changing anything. It was just a case of doing more of it. And it just got better. Organically, it just got there. Now, is it still different to how Michael takes it or Cody takes it or whatever? Of course it is. But I would say he's more than effective in something that's a simple technique.
Yeah, no, I like when I like to say look, like I said, it's a gray area. Let's find what you're strong at and let's amp it up and highlight it. It might be different than what somebody else is, and it might be a different technique. It's fine. I also let them know, like, hey, you didn't save the ball, they hit you with the ball. So let's make a difference. I wasn't a save. The forward screwed up and hit you with the ball, because I don't want to, there's certain things that, it's fundamentally wrong. And, people, you get the players on the side like, oh, great save. And you're like, no, like so-and-so, Sasha just hit her with the ball. Like everything that happened there was wrong on both ends. Like let's make a differentiation here. Because when you get to a higher level, which is where you want to go, that's not going to happen. You're going to get punished for it. You happen to make the save off your foot or off your knee or off something like that as you're moving forward when you're supposed to slow down or you're supposed to set, and you didn't. And you keep running at the ball and it hits you, and it's not a save in my mind. And so, I think that I like highlighting everybody's strengths, and I am not the person to tell them, you do a side volley instead of a drop kick or something like that. Whatever it is that you're good at, perfect it, period. And we'll work.
I think something, Saskia, that, that Paul brought up that was actually really good, because I think you had this similar situation. I know we're getting a little bit off topic here, but we always do, is the fact that just because somebody isn't great at something doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad at it. It might mean they haven't had enough reps. You have a goalkeeper right now, let's just say, who maybe didn't put the time back in the day, on their long form distribution, on their short form touches, playing out of the back and everything like that. And they're phenomenal now just because they've been doing the reps for
phenomenal, like ridiculous, like the best I've ever seen. And because they took the time and put the reps in over the past year and a half before I was even there. And hey, go knock that can of Coke off the top of that fence from 40 yards. Okay. It's not that that's a drill. Like, don't write that down, people.
Omar was about to start writing that down.
It's just an example of,
I've done it.
Yeah, she put the time in. An unbelievable work ethic and unbelievable focus. And like I said, that came from her previous coach. And I reinstill that in her because it's unbelievable where she was and what she is now. But that took, and she has stuff that I've never seen anybody do before. I don't even know, we have to name it after her, like a certain kind of a kick and stuff like that. But it's so effective. But it's her, and it's her thing, and it works. And it's not something where I expect the other three goalkeepers to do it. And I've told them that. I was like, this is her thing. Like, she can do that. You perfect the same distribution in a different way that's strong for your point. Figure it out. She figured this out. That's her thing. I'm not looking at you saying, why aren't you doing this that way, just like her? I'm saying, figure it out. Perfect your way to make it as effective as you can. There are multiple ways to do this situation. Make your way perfect. Period.
I mean, ultimately, Paul, don't we kind of at first need to let athletes be athletes first and foremost?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to see what they can do. I mean, it's with any kid. I mean, you've got to see where they're at, and then you've got to work with what they've got, and then obviously you try and tune things in. I mean, there's been a quote recently. I don't know who said it, but it's like, talent will take you to 16, but hard work will take you beyond. So it's what they've got is going to take them to there, and then you've got to do the hard work from there, which will tune those bits and pieces up, and obviously other areas of the sport of whatever they're in.
I think on the question you asked, Paul, is that for me with younger goalkeepers, they get so wrapped up in okay, I'm supposed to go and okay, here's a dumb example. All right, shuffling. You're not going to shuffle 15 yards. Who the hell shuffles 15 yards? You know what I mean? By the time you get there, it's halftime. So it's like, just be an athlete. Just get there. And your last step into your positioning is a shuffle. Like think about it. And I tell my kids, just get there. Be an athlete. You're an athlete. Just run there. Just get there. And then get yourself into position. But because I told you, again, literal, because I told you the drill was this, it's not shuffle. It's like, come on, think, be an athlete. I tell my kids that all the time, be an athlete, just be an athlete, and we'll work on the rest.
Yeah, I think.
Go.
No, sorry. I'm sorry. I think a quote that I heard recently on one of these shows, like a sports show, they're talking about one of the football players, I think, Carson Wentz, who's having a rough time in Philly right now. And they're talking about they use a quote. They said, in football, sometimes coaches, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And I think that is where I'm in between as a goalkeeper coach, where I'm right in between those, where I'm allowing it to happen because I want you to experiment and just figure out your own voice and figure out what you want to do. But at the same time, I'm also teetering that line of I need to coach that a little bit and then fine tune a little bit more. So I don't know, Paul, do you feel like that is probably the epitome of coaching is you're either coaching it, you're allowing it to happen, walking that fine line.
Yeah, I mean that's the part, that's coaching, right? That's teaching, is you're looking for an outcome and then you're working backwards from the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't make the picture in your head and try and work forward to it. You've got to go backwards from where you're trying to get to, and you know that's going to change. That process will change as the end product keeps changing. You know, you're not just going to say, okay, now they're technically proficient at this, we're going to stop working on it. I mean, we always say to the goalkeepers, let's say you're working on your deceleration into a set, right? That will become real good for whatever, 6 months. And now your focus might shift somewhere else. But in 6 months' time, that deceleration into your set is going to drop off again. And you've got to work on it again. That's goalkeeping. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. You know, coming for crosses, my timing was fantastic, but I wasn't keeping hold of stuff that was tight into the body. And then all of a sudden you're keeping hold of everything that's into the body, and crosses are drifting over the top of your head. It's goalkeeping. And that's the hard part. And that's why, going back to funny enough, the topic, or not the topic, but training in general, it's why you can't leave technical training behind, or the repetition, even if you don't want to call it technical training. It's why you can't leave repetition behind, but you also can't just do repetition.
Right.
Because then there's not the balance of getting to the reality of the game. And going back on that, not to kind of transition back into the reality of the game, the question that gets asked to me a lot is, well, when we watch you do training, it doesn't look like the game. What part of the game do you know that I'm working on? Because the reality of the game could be the pace of the ball. It could be the type of movement you're doing, which for me is one of the biggest ones. It's funny you brought that up just then, Saskia, about the shuffling. Is how do we move in certain instances, or do we move?
Right.
Sometimes you're better not moving, and just saying, well, okay, I'm out of position, but I'm stationary, so I can actually move when the action happens. Or if you're talking about the positioning in relation to the game, you know, what's the first movement typically when the ball turns over or the transition happens? Is I'm going to move as quick as I can backwards. Well, is that the right decision? Probably not. The right decision is probably to hold for half a second and actually analyze what's going on. No different to a cross, right? Is don't just start shifting your feet until you see what's happening.
Right.
So all those things can be done in a static exercise as well. But now, instead of the big movement, it might be the small movement. Like deceleration for me is a massive one. I mean, you talk about 1v1s is a great one. How many times do you maybe get away with a save because the ball does hit you, or not get away with it because you're just running? You know, or the shape you can make is limited, and you can turn around and go, well, that's technically the wrong save. Well, they have no choice. They're running. So when you're running, you have no choice of what save to make. You're going to have one choice, and that's going to be step your foot out and hope it hits you. So how you move, and those things can be done in all exercises. You might have the most basic exercise, simple exercise. We do a game. Well, it's a game to me. I don't know if it's a game to the goalkeepers, but call it perfection, right? Call it perfection. And it's at the end, we do it at the end of some training, and it's so basic. There's 4 flat markers in varied positions, depending on the day, depending how I feel, whatever's going on. And basically there's rules to the game. It might be you've got to get 3 catches. It might be you've got to get 3 saves, but I determine if they're good saves.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it becomes maybe not such a good game for them.
I do the same thing. I'm like, no, it's my choice.
But the movement might be they start on the disc and they're dropping in. The movement might be they've got to go to the flat marker and hold. So there's 2 commands. There's the color or whatever we decide, and then there's a second shell. Now the strike might come from 3 yards away at full pace, but I'm expecting them to try and catch it. And it's now becomes a mental game, but it also becomes a movement game, and it also becomes a fatigue game. So there's all these parts, a part of the game. And I did it with the academy kids the other day, and they'd had a great session, the academy kids, and I felt bad at the end for about 10 seconds. They had a really good session, and we did it. I thought I'm going to do it at the end, and they crumbled. They went down like a deck of cards because they couldn't do it in 3. And I wasn't at 3 yards, I was like 6 yards away. But because they couldn't do it in the 3 that was given to them, some of them it was taking 9 or 10, they losing their mind. And I'm like, you're just dominoes now. You're just gone. You mentally just have just absolutely shrunk. And that's another part. I mean, it ended up like I felt bad. And that wasn't what it was for. It was for the movement at the end of the session, like it's the end of the game. And you're only talking 3 actions, which became 9 actions. But something as simple as that, if you came to watch that from outside the fence, you'd be like, why do they pay this man to coach goalkeepers? Because you have no idea what I'm actually doing or what we're talking about. Yet if you watch it with the first team for the 10th, 20th time we've done it, or a different way we've done it, there's some stuff they pull off where you're like, that's why they're doing it. Because now instead of trying to block something, they're looking at their body shape, they're looking at their deceleration. The catch is an end product. The save is an end product, whatever. If it goes in or not, I'm not that fussed. But what you end up working on is something within it. And that's as simple as something can be. Then there's complex exercises where there's 4 movements, 3 moving balls, and 2 runners, and there's all these actions involved. But they're all realistic to the game in a certain way. But maybe not to the naked eye when they're like, yeah, but you're just standing 4 yards away from him smashing a ball at him. That doesn't happen in a game. Okay, maybe not. But the movement of the ball does. The movement of them does.
I love what you just said right there, Paul. I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about here too, and I don't know if Saskia's writing this down, is like, okay, come January when we come back from winter break, I'm just going to hit balls from 3 yards at the goalkeepers.
Omar's ready to do that.
But it's also I love what you said in regards to the mental aspect, is like sometimes putting a goalkeeper in a situation where they can't succeed, or it's going to be very difficult for them to succeed. And how can they overcome that? How can they test themselves to get past their comfort zone? Instead of having a 10-year-old or 11-year-old tell you, I can't catch that. I can't catch that. I can't catch that. You want that 10-year-old who's going to challenge themselves, even if it's maybe impossible for them to do it. I don't think
I would do anything that's impossible. I mean, you've got to set them up for success. Okay. But we actually just had it at one of the PGK sessions. A young girl we were doing servicing. She was like, I can't do that, meaning the service. And that, I lose my mind when they say that, because I mean, I think she was 14 years old. And I'm like, whoa, you can't kick a ball? What are you on about it? Like, I just struggle. I struggled with you as a grown man not being able to do it, but I struggle with players that can't kick a ball. Like, I don't understand, you're a football player. You can't kick a ball. So, I just pulled her aside and I said, look, it's dead easy. But because you're fearing the process, you're fearing looking silly. I said, but there's nothing to fear. And by the end of the session, by no means am I telling you she was pinging it around the field, but she has more confidence to do it. But you've just got to show it and let it calm down.
Yeah.
But you can't do it where it's something that's impossible. And I'm saying that
KK said the same thing when we had KK on. Like, Karina, she was just like, you've got to allow it, and we get into all those young goalkeeper coaches and young field player coaches watching right now, or anybody like how many of those kids we get to, why aren't you taking your goal kicks? Well, because Paul takes a goal kick better than I do. And that's what my coach said. And so what's more important here? Development, or, that Brian takes a goal kick better than Pete? How's Pete going to get better? And all you've done is like put that negativity on him. Like, let it happen.
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Saskia, because, Omar, I know that's something that you've had in regards to, and obviously, Paul, you have this consistently with your academy and everything, but Omar, especially with just the one-on-one instruction consistently, when you have people fly in from, I don't know, Madagascar to come train with you, is that they'll come into an environment and they're concerned about what you'll think of their ability in something. So they'll ask you to alter the exercise because they don't want to look bad in front of you, as opposed to really trying to challenge themselves and try something different.
Yeah, and I think, whenever you train, for me at least, people will come from whenever they're coming to California to vacation and they want to get a session in. I think after like the first 10, 15 minutes, you could tell like we both want to showcase that I'm a good coach and they're good goalkeepers. And after like the first 10, 15 minutes, we kind of go, all right, let's decompress a little bit. Let's just kind of play like, how we would coach, how we would play regularly, and not try to impress anybody. And I think after those 10, 15 minutes, it's good. And the only time I've ever had any goalkeepers ask to change anything is when we do, let's say it's a group of 4, and 3 of those people we're doing like 1v1s or situations where, like, Paul was talking about earlier, 3v2 and stuff like that, where it's a rough surface and I play them the ball and the ball keeps getting under their feet. And like, hey, can I not be the person who shoots this ball, or can I be the one who passes it? And I'm just like, I think at first I would have caved and I would have said, yeah, you're right. I don't want you to mess up a session for Mike and Paul and Saskia. Let's go ahead and make sure that they get their reps as well. I think, Saskia, I spoke to you on the podcast, and you were just like, but even I think it was Joe Lloyden as well, like, use that as pressure training. Yeah, they can't figure the pass out. But again, that's the tough part, the psychological side of things.
Yeah, I know, because it's like, is it supposed to be a perfect session?
Well, perfect session, and they come to me once, not every single day, right? So that's something I can see over a span of a few days. You'd be like, yeah, we can work on this. Monday was much worse. Friday's a lot better. But if I only get you for one session, you're coming in, and for them, their experience is their experience. I want them to be great. They come in, and then they kind of, okay, well, shoot, that kind of sucked. I was terrible with my feet. I think I messed up the practice. But it's like, I'm kind of over that now, where I'm like, you know what?
Guess what? Exactly. You were terrible at your feet, with your feet, to figure it out, because that's important.
It's the reality too. And even if you think about strikers as well. For example, like I had a session a few days ago where I hit a through ball, it hit a mannequin, and then everyone stopped, and then I went towards the mannequin, I touched the ball around the mannequin, and I shot and I scored. The goalkeeper was like, well, like that wouldn't happen. Like the ball stopped. Yeah, I'm like, what do you think happens when your defender intercepts the ball, slips, or something happens, and the ball's still alive? Like, you need to understand.
That's
you know what I mean? Like, you need to
play it.
Yeah, it's like, but that's what it is, though. I think, Paul, I think you became famous on my podcast, by the way. I don't know if I ever told you this, but when you said, I think I even have it on my YouTube, when you said, the last rep needs to be a good rep, does not exist in my book. And
you say that all the time, Omar.
Yeah, well, no, and I copied.
Got it from Paul. You got it from Paul.
Well, you brought it up before.
Yeah, and coaches were messaging me, like, oh my God, that's such an idea that I never conceptualized. That's such a smart thing for him to do. Like, I thought I had to end the practice where their confidence was running high. I'm like, well, if you listen back to the podcast, don't take it, out of context. Paul said, yeah, if the goalkeeper wants to get another rep and, he has a game on the weekend, we're going to make sure they're confident. But if we have scenarios in training where we want pressure training, add to the context, and that's what the session looks like, we're not going to be okay with the ball going through your legs on the 5th rep out of the 5th rep. We're going to let it happen. You're going to have to think about it. And now that's another layer of coaching where it's like, think about it for the rest of the day. Think about it till tomorrow, and let's see how you bounce back. If you don't bounce back and you don't know how to handle that pressure, what's going to happen if I put you in, in a 90-minute game where we're in the playoffs? We have to beat the Galaxy, which never happens, but we have to beat the Galaxy, and we're expecting you to not be, somebody who falls under pressure.
No,
so it's important.
It's funny because before I go, Omar and Paul, I guess I'll give you credit. Sorry, Omar, I'm taking all the credit away from you, but I do that.
Okay.
I do that as well now because, keepers, they'll be like, oh, coach, one more. And I'm like, nope. I'm like, switch it up. Nope. And I'm like, you might have another set or something. So like, you have another set, but no, you can't have another one. Sorry. Think about it.
And a lot of that comes from two ways, though. One is everything's counted. That's the other thing for me, is if we're doing 4 reps, 5 reps, 6 reps, and it's on, obviously we're in the G7s, so everything's counted anyway. Every impact in the ground, every jump, every dive, so all of a sudden, if I get that back at the end of the day and it's like 480, you know what I mean? Because someone's asked for one more rep, it's, there's an issue to it as well. But so it works twofold. But you're right. If you just say it out loud, people are like, oh, he's out of order. He just wants to bury them. And it starts to sound that way. And this is what I'm saying with goalkeeping coaching and people taking stuff out of context, where he says he does things realistically. And then they come and they see one exercise and they're like, that doesn't look realistic. And you're like, yeah, because you're not understanding the whole package of what a week, a month, a season is. And that's the important part. And Mike, you were saying about how do you plan sessions? That's the important part, is one flows into the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And again, you don't start January 1 till the end of December. You work from the end of December back to January 1.
Yeah.
So if you're planning for the college season, especially at UCLA, you're planning to play in the College Cup final. You're not planning to play in the ACC, not the ACC, you're not in the ACC. That's from me being the ACC. Sorry. You're not planning to play in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is like, yeah, whatever. You know, that's a byproduct of winning the College Cup.
Absolutely.
So you plan backwards from there. Otherwise, everything's going to be a mess.
Yeah, no, totally. 100%.
And you know, if you start planning preseason, just thinking about preseason, well, you've not thought it through. And that's where everything has to come in when you're talking about all your scenarios, all your topics, all the reps that I've got to get in, you know, all the different video sessions that I've got to get in, because otherwise you end up you can either overdo it with the goalkeepers, or you end up, I think the one that people miss the most when I talk to, especially young goalkeepers, is I'm like, how often do you do crosses? Oh, once every month. And you're like, whoa. Like, and yet you're going to get moaned at if you don't come for that cross.
And I agree with you 100%. I'm like, I tried to get them in every week. I used to finish every practice with them. Like, pretty much like, all right, you guys, we're going to cool down. We're going to take some crosses. Just get your timing, get whatever. But absolutely, it can't be once a month. It can't be once a month for this, for that, the other. There's got to be a process, and everything has to tie into each other, and there's got to be an end game to it. And you know, in that movement, in that travel, you know, things come up that you have to tweak and that you have to add into, and you have to say, okay, this isn't translating, or this and that and the other, but there's got to be a plan, you know. And yeah, and we will win the College Cup, because that's the one thing I don't have on my resume. So I gotta get it, guys. I gotta get it.
All right. Well, we'll let you go. No, we'll let you go so Amanda doesn't get mad. So.
I have actually player meetings right now because everybody went home. But Paul, awesome. Thanks. Now I know that everything that Omar talks about just filth comes from you. So it's awesome.
Oh, good.
So I'll just be like, did Paul say that? Did Paul say that? Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
We'll see
I'm
you
sorry I
later,
have to
Saskia.
cut it short. Bye, guys.
No worries. All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks, Saskia. See ya.
All right. So, and then there were three. So now kind of getting back into this, Paul, I actually want to ask you about this, because one of the issues with the starting positions is the issue of goalkeepers starting to mimic patterns. You know, I see a lot of times, you know, especially at the club level, at the youth club level, goalkeepers who just, they move in patterns. And like Saskia was talking about the shuffling, right? Well, I've seen it before. I've just seen it. I'm like, I can tell who's worked with what goalkeeper coach and what goalkeeper coach, because based on how they move, and they move in literally a grid, but the game is three-dimensional, you know? And I think that's something that I think, you know, I'd love for you to kind of explain a little bit about, in regards to, it's not left, right, up, down. It's all over the place, the movement.
Yeah, but that's per goalkeeper. I remember watching David Seaman play. Obviously, that's going to be before some people's time, but I mean, Dave Seaman would stand 25 yards out from goal, hand behind his back, and just stand there. I mean, no matter where the ball went, you know, if it went to the left, he was still stood there, hands behind his back, just watching the game. And that was him. And you look at these different goalkeepers, and everyone has their own way of staying connected. Now, obviously, the game has, you know, changed slightly in different ways, and you watch different goalkeepers' movements, but there's still plenty of goalkeepers playing today that take one position up when the ball is in the attacking third, you know, in their own attacking third. And they don't necessarily move from, you know, left to right, or, you know, change their positioning too much. Once they're up and they feel they're supporting the back line, that's the position they take. Now you've got others that are very active behind the back line, and they're constantly moving. Again, it's based off the goalkeeper and how they are. Me personally, I like my goalkeeper to be on the half of the field, left to right, where the ball is. I think it gives you an extra yard. It gives you a moment where you haven't got to move as aggressively. I know there's goalkeepers that take it into thirds, and they want the pitch split in thirds from left to right or right to left, and they want them in that third. Again, it depends on the level, depends on how your team is in front of you. How do you play? Is it a back line that plays high? Is it a back line that plays low? You're playing 3 at the back, 4 at the back, 5 at the back. All these things come into it. And in the youth game, that's even more important. I mean, I've got a daughter who plays U12, and funny enough, she's a centre back. And I look at how deep their back line is. There's no way the goalkeeper can play high. You know, the back line's too deep, and they play 11 aside. It's their first year 11 aside, and the goalkeeper really top of the box is as high as she can come. So that's a product of the team. It's not a product of her. You know, she's not stuck on the line or anything like that. But if she comes any higher, they're all going to be getting in each other's way real quick. But you know, that's different. I mean, again, I can give you scenarios with the Dynamo this year, working with Marco and Cody as well in pre-season. I wanted them to be a little bit more active side to side. Now, some of that is because we want to rotate the ball as well. So obviously, if you've got a better passing angle to come out of and you can rotate the ball better, then obviously you can bypass and skip defenders, and it makes it easier, you know, rather than scrambling into position to pick the ball up and then have to play. For me, if you're in position early, you're actually better when you're in possession. It actually helps more in possession than it does out of possession.
Paul, that's something I want to bring up with you. And, you know, Omar, I know this has been a big topic this entire summer. I know I heard you say you're like, I hate the term the modern game, because it makes it sound like that, you know, the game before, you know, that was completely inconsequential in regards to what we used to do in the past, because the game evolves, but it's not that the game is different, you know, per se, I'm guessing you're saying. But is that everything nowadays, it seems like all goalkeeper coaches, or a lot of saying is like, okay, well, every activity has to have an in possession and out of possession element to it. We no longer, and it seems like you're trying to say that there is a time and place for just technical work that has nothing to do with in possession, and there's a time and place for just work that has nothing to do with out of possession either.
Yeah, I mean, you've still got to teach the position. I mean, you've still got to work on your basics, no matter what you do. Doesn't matter what field of work you're in, you still have to, you know, maintain your qualities in you know, your basic work. If a field player never strikes a ball big, you know, if they're not working on switching the point, of course they can do that in a phase of play, but maybe they want to do 5 or 10 reps extra of switching the point. So they just want to work on that clean striking with both feet. That's no different to catching 5 or 6 strike. No one's saying we've got to do 30 catches and 50 of this and these big numbers, which I think you probably saw back in the day, you know, a lot of getting up and getting down and all this. And yes, you can include it into better phases of the game, but there's still a part where you can make sure technique is honed and is clean. And because obviously that breeds confidence as well, you know, and I personally find it interesting is you can go on a lot of, you know, you can go a lot of conferences, a lot of these, you know, these educational Zooms and whatnot, and you'll hear goalkeeping coaches are at good levels around the world, and they'll say, you know, never see a goalkeeping coach volleying a ball. You should never volley a ball. Then you go and watch them in their own environment, and the first thing you see is them volleying a ball. Because, and I tell you why it is. It's because the goalkeepers they're working with are probably going to say to them, I need a certain few things. They're not saying, oh, I need a volley. They're probably saying, oh yeah, I just want to get 10 good hands in today, want 10 good low ones before we get going. I just want to, you know, feel the ball. And that's the part of it that gets lost on, I think, goalkeeping coaches learning the trade, is you see, because it's so easy to get all this access now to all this information, there's all this educational information, but a lot of it is getting told, which isn't what's happening necessarily on the field, in their real environments. I volley a ball, I'll tell you I volley a ball. I have no issue with it, because it's going to go from point A to point B where I want it. Now, it's not the only thing I do. Going to strike from the floor, going to hit a half volley, a side volley, moving ball, stationary ball, hit them all. But I would never say you can't do something. Like people talk about hand service is another thing. Well, you should never hand service. Why not? Why not if it replicates something you're trying to do? There's no reason not to do it. Would I do it every single day? Of course not. But these are the things with goalkeeping coaching, for me, that is, the reality is not always what's presented on these type of things. And, you know, you've got to dig deep sometimes to find out the reality of what actually goes on. Yeah. And when you see inside the top level, you'll see the reality. You know, if you get to go into a Man United, an Arsenal, a Tottenham, Man City, a Barcelona, I can guarantee you there's volleying going on. I can guarantee you there's hand service going on. I can guarantee you there's stationary work going on. Yet a lot of those goalkeeping coaches, when they're out in front of the crowds, will say, don't do it. And that's, for me, that's the hard bit for the young goalkeeping coaches that are trying to learn, because there's a place for everything. It's again, what is best for the players you've got. And Saskia said it well. All goalkeepers are different. All goalkeepers are different. So you've got to understand what each one of them needs and how to get the best out of each of them. And that's so important. And that's why, for me, it's important to do in possession work, out of possession work. Of course it is. That's also the game. But I'm not suddenly going to go into training having done no warm up, having done no light ball work to get us going, and just suddenly be in possession, out of possession. You know, some days do we go quicker? Do we move through things sharper? Yeah. Some days do we go through slower? Do we go through more Q&A? Do we go through more, what do they see? What do they feel? Yeah. You know, and that's how it is. Some days we do only 2 rep exercises, meaning every exercise has 2 reps involved. So there's going to be less me to them or them to them. It's going to be more action, movement, action. Or it could even be movement, action, movement, action. And there could even be another movement afterwards. But they're all, for me, that's all needed in the game for the goalkeeper to progress to the best of their ability. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. I just find it interesting that some swing one way, or all the way, to one end. Yet when you see the reality in the real world, it actually isn't that. You know, and you go and watch the best goalkeepers in the world. Manuel Neuer, Oblak, Edison, Allison, all these goalkeepers. Watch their true sessions, and there's your answers. But you've also got to see their true sessions with the team and in with the groups, because a lot of that, what in possession, out of possession, is done with the team. And for me, that's the best way to do it. Because here's another thing, not to harp on here, Mike, but the 1v1s, me dribbling at a goalkeeper does not, by any way, shape or form, look like what it looks like on a Saturday afternoon for the goalkeepers. Because I'll smash a ball, but I'm not dinking it, flipping it, rolling it, you know, any of that. That's where, you know, for us at the club, I'll tell you, I'll talk to the sports scientists, talk to Tab. Hey, can we do 1v1s? Because the field players need to do some accelerations. Can we do it with the ball to goal? I don't care if the forwards end up on top of the keepers, smashing the keepers. Doesn't matter. It's real, it's live, it's exactly how the game looks. So now I've got the pace of the game. I can put the goalkeepers in their real starting position. Now you're talking about what the topic of the session was. But again, that's not with me, that's with the team. And there might only be 10, 15 reps. And not much room for coaching in that. So we film that and we'll go back and coach it. And we'll work backwards. But we'll do some technical work first to make sure maybe we cover some points before it. Now, for me, that's progressing into the session. Maybe the session goes to 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s. That is now for the flow of the session. That is now working your goalkeeper through topics and scenarios. I don't want to say topics. I mean topics. You know, there's more than one topic in every scenario now.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Paul, that when you're bringing that up right now, you know, and Omar, I know we've had this discussion before as well too, and actually we brought it up with Brenton a few weeks back too, is that the even just the movement of how I move or how you move or how Omar moves is not going to simulate how Rachel Daly's going to move, you know, or any high level world class type of player, you know. They just move differently, and that's just because of all the years of experience of them playing at that position, you know. So I don't know how you feel about this, Omar, as well too, but like, do you start getting in this thing as well, and you start doing those 1v1 activities or, you know, any type of finishing activities with the goalkeeper coach? Well, these goalkeepers are starting to now move based on playing against the goalkeeper coach rather than playing against the players of their level and the demands of their age group, let's say 11-year-old or 12-year-old, who's going to move very differently than you're going to move. You know, whoever wants to take it. So,
I mean, I just feel like most players, I mean, myself included, I never saw my my goalkeeper coach for the Galaxy when I was there, he hit a lot of half volleys because his legs were tired. I don't know what it was, but he hit a lot of half volleys from the ground. And I never thought in my head, oh, well, that's not how I'm going to see the ball in the game. I just reacted to what I saw, and I made the saves the way I needed to make them. He put us in different situations, game-like situations throughout the week, and I think it was up to us to infer that and understand, okay, you know, the movements is what I'm really looking for. The finish is going to be a little bit different, but like Paul said earlier, there's going to be exercises that it's going to be close range shots where sometimes those final movements in a weekly session where it's game like stuff, that final movement will be a header or a shot from the 6 or 6 to the 12. And because we worked on reaction training and we isolated that, we're able to make those saves. At the same time, too, there are also drills that are talking about fast approach, slow arrival, where moving into your spot, decelerating, and making sure your hips don't rock up as a shot is coming from close range as well. So as long as goalkeeper coaches are very intentional about their sessions and deliberate of how they put things together, it'll all piece together for the goalkeeper. And I think for me, at least, I never really saw a half volley or somebody that I trained against who wasn't very good or didn't have a left foot and was striking with their left foot. I just kind of took it for what I saw. And then I went into the game, and I'm hoping throughout the week that my goalkeeper coach put me in those tight scenarios where even though it wasn't a world-class finisher, it was still something close range where my reaction so that I could step in and perform that action on the weekend.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's funny you're saying that, Omar, because one of the conversations, you know, that I've had recently, and Paul, I'd love to get your feedback on this, is that when you're talking about a session in isolation, let's just say, which is a one-on-one or a small group or anything like that, is for the goalkeeper to look at it more as like an active lecture, based on you're being active, but at the same time you're learning, you know, how to deal with different scenarios, you know, and what to do in these situations, you know, and getting feedback and everything like that. And that their real training is, and again, this is for an individual coach or, you know, who isn't working with a team, their real training is when they go back with their club, you know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one, I'm not a fan of individual training, just throwing that out there. Like, I just think it's very difficult with one goalkeeper and one coach, because you really are limited then to the scenarios you can set up. At least if you've got a couple of people, you can have a couple of reps, you can have a couple of different movements, etc. I always think a small group is always the best way to go, you know, 2 or 3 goalkeepers. Plus your work to rest is always better. I think when you're doing individual, you end up battering the kid. And the kid wants more. I mean, how many times do you have a parent come to you and say, work my kid hard? And I just look at them and go, take them to a fitness camp. Like, my job's not to get them fit,
Yep.
you know? But that's kind of, you know, when you've got the small group, you can even walk through some things and put them in positions and be like, okay, look, this is the scenario that might happen. You might not actually run the scenario, but you can at least put them in the positions and show them how it would look. But yeah, it's, you know, for me, all the stuff with small group training and trying to get the sessions through that you want to get through, it's about making sure you've got the fundamentals into the kids first. Because if you get the fundamentals in, then you can work on the movement, and the movement would be the next part. Then it would be the action before the movement. So the action before the action. So now you're going on based off the topic today. And now you're working into the game scenario. Now, would I, you know, I don't want to say I never like ping balls on kids. Normally the last couple of minutes of every session, you know, for my own ego, I just like to score goals on 8-year-olds. But typically it's more controlled for the first, you know, if we're doing a 90-minute session, for the first hour and 15, it's more controlled. And then that last 10, 15 minutes might get a bit out of hand. But, you know, even with the pros, other than game day in the warm-up, I rarely strike a ball on goal from anywhere near the top of the box. Everything is within 12 yards because that's what you see in a game. You know, and they're going to see it from the field players from the top of the box and from 16 yards. But if you look at where we give goals up, by the way, we give a lot of goals up this year. If you look where we give goals up from, it's from about 12 to 16 yards just on either side of the penalty spot. So if you look at my sessions, most of them, that's where I'm standing, or that's where the actions are coming from, because that's what we see. So, going back to the young kids, obviously you tend to give them more because you don't know what they're seeing in their club environments, in their team environments. But you've got to give them the basics to start with. It's no good just putting them in these scenarios when they've got no idea of how to set, move, make the save, come for the cross, go one-on-one. But still, for me, the idea is that you're setting them up ready for their small-sided, ready for their phases, ready for their team.
Yeah. Omar, I want to say this with you right now is that first off, I think, this has been really enlightening, Paul, honestly, because I think one of the things for us to discuss these things on the show, between ourselves. It's another thing, somebody like yourself who's in this environment and has seen so many different levels of the game to kind of break it down like this. One thing is that you were talking about just not striking the ball from distance. I think this is really talking a lot about the starting positions too. Is like, should we focus more on where are our goalkeepers giving up goals and developing sessions based on those areas, as opposed to, saying, oh, well, we have to work on this area and we have to work on this area and we have to work on this area.
Yeah, I mean, when we analyze, at the end of the season, but I typically do it every month, is analyze what we're giving up. Not just goals, but shots. Obviously, you're not just going to look at your goals, but and the other things will get touched on. It's not like you're going to ignore shots from outside the box, because then all of a sudden you get a screamer against Dallas from 35 yards that goes in the side netting. So it's not saying it's not going to happen, but you've only got X amount of time in a week. And especially this season, we're going Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. So you've only got X amount of training sessions. So you've got to focus and try and get into the areas and present the scenarios that you're going to see the majority of, right? Crossing is another example. And I find it a very interesting one because I can't replicate the crosses that come in a game. I can float balls in, I can drive balls in, but that's not a cross that comes in the game. And the truth is, when you look at the crosses that were faced this year by MLS goalkeepers dealt with around 1% of them. I think it was just over of all crosses, right? In the Premier League, it's lower than 1%. Now, what defines a cross when you're looking at Opta stats? Obviously, pullbacks are crosses. So you're not going to get to a lot of those. But still, that's a low number, obviously very low. But that shows you again, what part, because there's a lot of crosses. So what part of the cross are you training? So now, big floated balls in, of course, you're gonna throw some in because there's the timing of coming for the ball that comes in, not necessarily from wide on the sideline, but maybe higher outside the box that comes in on the angle where you're coming up behind the back line to win the ball. Right? That's an atypical ball you'd see in the MLS. Or the dinked ball, that's where it's inside the 18 and it's dinked to say the top of the 6 or the back of the 6. Again, that's a ball you come for quite a lot. But for the amount of crosses that come in, there is not that many, obviously, that are defended by the goalkeeper. But then there needs to be a movement for what they do have to defend, which is then going to be the next action, which is either going to be the header, the volley, the shot, or whatever it may be. So you've got to look at all of this to make sure your training covers those movements. So for me, obviously you analyze every game, you analyze every opponent before you play them, of what you're going to see or you think you're going to see. But we look at it, sometimes I share it with the keepers, sometimes I just do it myself, and we pull up the True Media stuff, which just shows what we're giving up, what the goalkeepers are factually seeing. And then you build your sessions based off of that. And the other topics, the other areas are going to get covered anyway, because they're in training. So if I'm not doing a load of shooting from 18 to 25 yards, believe you me, when you play double boxes, 5v5, there's shots coming from 18 to 25 yards. So it's not like it's getting ignored, but you've got to, deflections is another one. I do a lot of work on deflections because, again, a lot of shots are off of one touch, below 4 foot, with inside 12 yards. That is where a lot of shots and a lot of goals come from. So you've got to replicate that. Now I need equipment for that because you need the deflections. So we use, different things for the deflections. And the goalkeepers hate it because a lot of it is close in, a lot of pace. and a lot of, making an action, and then within the action, having to do something to try and stop the ball, or standing longer and accepting you're going to get beat in the far corners. But this is what you see in a game. So you've got to try and replicate it as much as you can. So analyzing what has factually happened and what you're going to be seeing from certain teams is a massive, massive part of the game. A massive part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about, just in fact, as like one of the mistakes I've made in the past is just like focused way too much on approach to the cross and handling the cross as opposed to the retreat aspect of the cross. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. Omar, I don't know if that's something that you're thinking in your head right now, or how much time you spend actually on the handling as opposed to the retreat.
No, yeah, I mean, I wish I kept more notes from my college time, because I spent more time with them. But even in college time, it's such a small window, because like I said, we said on the podcast before, our coach is saying just make sure the starter doesn't get hurt and make sure the backups don't get hurt as well. So I'm not doing as much stuff, but the majority of what I'm doing is handling. And if the new session I just watched with Martin Margetson from the national team, he calls it the Mayweather Drill, where the majority, he does like 50, because he's 50-0. He'll do like 50 shots from different parts of the goal, whether it's a volley, half volley, all that stuff. And that's kind of what I used to do. I would do small retreats, but nothing where the legs would be killed, but mainly just the handling. And it's mainly because that's what the goalkeepers wanted. That's what they asked for. And that's kind of, again, sometimes we're at the mercy of what the goalkeepers want versus what our ego and what we kind of want to show off to other coaches.
But you just brought up something right there, and I think Paul can attest to this in regards to, like, is it about what the goalkeeper wants, or is it about what the goalkeeper needs, based on the demands of the game? And Paul, I'm asking that to you, because that's something that I struggle with as well.
Yeah, that's a balance as well, because you're going to have young goalkeepers that think they know what they need, and you've got to educate them. And then you're going to have senior goalkeepers that actually do have a grasp on what they need. And you've got to find the balance of that versus also dripping in there what you have also seen that you think they need. I've always been big on talking to the keepers, going, especially when we're doing video, like it not being about me telling them. It's about, what do we see here? What do we think? What did you think about a week in training leading up to this? What did you think about the session in general? Now, if they turn around and go, wow, I thought the session was absolutely terrible, Paul, that exercise was awful. Now, okay, why? Now, typically that doesn't happen. I can remember one exercise I did once where I thought it was terrible. And I asked both the keepers at the time that were in it, and they both went, yeah, let's not do that again. And I didn't even bother looking at the session again. I just never did it. Yeah, but I had the feeling, and they said it. Now, there's other things where goalkeepers have said, oh, I'd like to do that on that specific day. And I've looked at it and gone, exercise, not a bad exercise. Don't know if I would do it on that day. And then explain to them the reasoning for that. Maybe it's too heavy, maybe it doesn't fit in with what's going on. And then a decision's made. So I think there's some coaches that go too far to what the goalkeeper needs. And I think there's a danger zone there, because at the end of the day, you might have to drop that goalkeeper. And you can create a beast that you don't want to create. But on the same way, you can't go in as, this is the way we're doing it, no matter what. It's my way or a highway. That will not work, especially with professional goalkeepers, or goalkeepers that have a good grasp on goalkeeping. And as coaches, we don't know everything. We just don't. I mean, you're going to pick up goalkeepers at times that have had 4, 5, 6 different coaches, and they're going to have picked up some great stuff along the way. And you can't ignore that fact. And you can't be closed-minded enough to think that you know better than the next person.
I think you just brought up a great point right now, and I know we need to. Both Omar and I actually have sessions at 4:00, so we're gonna have to start wrapping up. But I mean, Paul, you've taken over an hour and a half of your time, and honestly, I just really want to thank you, because I think this has just been. I mean, there's so many clips here. I'm just like looking. It's like I don't even have to. Usually, I go through every episode and I go through the notes and I go, this might be a usable clip. This might be a usable clip. Everything's usable. So I don't know what to do. You've just given way too much good information. But I do want to say, God, I think I just totally lost my train of thought right here. Oh, yes, that you have to be open-minded in regards to, as we're wrapping up here, what a goalkeeper's experienced in their past as well too, and being willing to listen to what they've experienced and seeing what out of their experience you can use to the benefit of that goalkeeper is what you're trying to say, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's goalkeeping's listen, anyone that's worked with me will tell you that I have strong opinions on certain things, on certain technical aspects, on how sessions should be run, etc. But also the same goalkeepers will tell you that I'll be open-minded and listen to anything that's presented to me. Because at the end of it, it's not about me. I'm not the one going out there and playing. It's about the goalkeeper that's going out there and playing. And then the same note, obviously from a team standpoint, they're not my goalkeepers. They're the team's goalkeepers. They're the head coach's goalkeepers. So you're trying to do the best job you can for them, to do the best job they can for the team, to do the best job they can for the head coach. And people lose track of that. And it becomes about them and their goalkeepers. It's not their goalkeepers. That's not how it is. And I make a big point, this is obviously I'm way off topic, but I make a big point of saying to all the goalkeepers at the club, always have done, go and make your own relationships with the other coaches, because they're going to give you important information as well about the game. I mean, you look at who we've got at the Dynamo. You've got Tab Ramos, obviously, vastly experienced. You've got Pablo Mascherani as an assistant, who's been obviously a fantastic player and a fantastic coach. And then you've got Amid. Amid's coached at all levels, all over the world, and they've got great views on the game. So why wouldn't you want their information and their input on the goalkeeper? I mean, all three of these are played at a great level and coached at a great level. So that's all part of goalkeeping coaching as well. And I think we get caught up, and especially in the US, because goalkeeping coaching's been made this bubble, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But it's been made this bubble where we're like a separate entity almost. And we're not. I mean, it's one player in a team, an important player, of course, but it's a position that needs to be looked at from everybody: the player, the coaches, the sports scientists, and even at the young ages, when talking about the 10-year-olds and the 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds, how many of them can't move correctly, right? And we've got to help them with that. You're talking about being out of position and moving into position, but you got to teach them how to move first. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it needs a lot of people, not just a goalkeeping coach. And I think that's very important.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I before we go, I mean, I really want to encourage everybody out there to check out Performance Goalkeeping. I mean, I wanted to show some of your clips, but we can't do them justice, honestly. I mean, you've got so many good videos on your website of all the training that you guys do and everything like that. So I really encourage people to go out there and check it out. If people want to reach out to you directly, whether they're interested, in your personal training that you have going on with the academy, or that maybe they're a young coach and they're looking for some advice and everything like that, where's the best place for them to reach out?
Either through the website, probably through the website is the best way, through the contact form, or social media is fine.
Okay.
I'm not the best at returning emails or messages. I'm good. I'll get there eventually, but my timing is not always the best. This time of year is okay, but typically my timing is about a 10-day turnaround.
Well, that's okay, because you got Grubb, you got Brenton, you got a bunch, Ryan, you got a bunch of people over there too who can help out on that aspect. And remember, guys, if you have a guest suggestion or a topic suggestion, shout out to everybody who's actually given this topic suggestion. Couldn't think of a better guest to give it for, but contact at Inside the 18. That's the number 18media.com, or at Goalkeeper Podcast on all social media platforms. Omar, you got any cool things in the works? I see you got maybe some new merch you want to plug.
Yeah, I mean, I have my merch. It's a bundle deal, but I think by the time people hear it, it'll be expired. But yeah, I'll have new merch on my website, progkacademy.com, and then new content coming in as well.
Awesome, guys. Remember, that's all the time on Inside the 18, and we are out. Later, guys.